Everyone, welcome to the Brewers Journey, basic cart and horse timeline for the aspiring pro brewer. We'll just give some people some time to enter the room and kind of get settled. Feel free to answer the poll question that's being presented there by Jenna. Just asking, where you're from. Give a shout out in the chat window. As we go through the presentation, feel free to ask any questions that you might have that come up along the way, and we'll do some about 10 or 15 minutes at the end to answer some of those questions for you. Awesome, great to see people. A lot of people from the south. Nice. All right. Excellent. Awesome. Great. So for those of you who are just joining us, this is the Brewer's Journey basic cart and horse timelines for the aspiring pro brewer. My name is Scott McCormick. I'm with Stout Tanks and Kettles. Just to give a brief overview and introduction of myself here. I work with Stout Tanks and Kettles as a system designer. I help folks design their systems specifically for their brewing needs. A little bit about my background. I started off in software for software as a service company. Worked in the finance department, and then moved to technical support and customer care, where I really focused on improving the customer experience as it related to implementation of software as a service and implementing systems faster. So it was a natural fit for me at Stout, helping people configure their brewing systems with my brewing background as a home brewer for over 12 years. As I said, I've been with Stout for over 3 years now, and I've helped over 100 people, brewers, go from start to finish as far as the concept phase, budgetary planning, and all the way through system configuration and the startup process as they brew their first beers as often their first beers as a professional brewery owner. One thing I did want to mention, this virtual Brewers Conference is about our deep partnerships and connections in the industry. Obviously, not the only one here at Stout that helps help folks configure their systems. We leverage the collective knowledge of all of our folks here and our partnerships in the industry with our suppliers and others to help solve problems for our customers. So that I'm just going to turn off my my camera here after that introduction. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat window, and we'll answer those toward the end of the presentation here. Thanks again for joining me. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Joseph Campbell's A Hero's Journey, I did want to give a little bit of background, so we have some common context as we go through this presentation. Joseph Campbell was an American professor of literature who posited that the hero's journey throughout literature and throughout human history, essentially, has been the hero's journey is essentially the same story. The details of who that hero is change throughout those stories, but the actual underlying process of a hero's journey is the same. So the hero's journey always starts with the hero. At the very top of that circle, you can see it's split into the known world and the unknown world. It always starts with the hero and a little bit of background on the hero themselves. Uh, you know, you can think of many stories throughout human history, the Odyssey, all the way up through modern literature and popular movies, like classics like Star Wars or The Wizard of Oz. The hero's journey throughout those stories is essentially the same. There's always a call to adventure. So it starts off in the ordinary world, the known world, where your hero is called to adventure, whether that call is through a literal call or through some force that is acting on that hero to compel them into their adventure. It might be the shadow across the land, or some force of evil that threatens the Shire, or whatever it may be. There's typically a refusal of the call. So I can't join the rebellion against the Empire. I've got work to do. That hero resists that call to action, but is compelled into crossing a threshold. There's a threshold from that known world into the unknown world, and your hero gets pushed into action where they move into the unknown. That's where they meet their mentor or helper along the way. There's always some sort of spirit or physical helper that's there to help guide the hero along their journey as they experience challenges and temptations and trials and tribulations. Early on in that process, the hero will have early successes and failures. There will be little challenges that seem to almost stop the hero along their path, but with the help of their mentor, they move past those challenges and further along their journey. As you can see at the very bottom of this graphic, there's an abyss somewhere. That abyss isn't necessarily right in the middle of the story. It floats around somewhere in that unknown world. That abyss can happen pretty much anywhere, but that abyss requires the hero to confront their innermost self and to do self-reflection to essentially find the power to defeat the dragon, or destroy the demon that is threatening them or their loved ones. So as they fight that demon and overcome that challenge, and oftentimes it's death and rebirth in the story, but your hero always prevails, and through that, your hero is transformed. So that fight, that struggle that they go through, actually transforms them through some newfound power that they have through that ordeal, and moves them along to the atonement, where they get some sort of gift or physical manifestation of some object of great importance. They usually receive a sword or a lightsaber, a ring or a wand, whatever it may be. There's a symbol of that power that they've obtained through their process, through their hero's journey. And that moves the hero into their return. There's always some sort of return, usually not a challenge-free return. There's usually some last bad guy that they have to fight to get back home. There's one last challenge that they have as they move back into the known world, and they receive a reward for that. That's um, time to shine. They're recognized for defeating whatever it was in the abyss. They're recognized as having great power. On that road back home, they return victorious, and they have domain over the known and the unknown worlds. So that's the background of the hero's journey. Just wanted to give that background so that we're all coming from the same place. And I want you to think of your favorite story, think of your favorite hero's journey. We all have one. I happen to be a Star Wars fan, so that's what I usually think of. Because as we've helped thousands of folks go through the process of starting their brewery, we realize that although the details of each individual starting a brewery are different, and everyone's reason for starting a brewery is different, and as unique as all of the individuals that come to us, the underlying process of starting a brewery, the brewer's journey, is very similar to the hero's journey. There are certain tasks, there are certain pieces that need to be in place in a specific order for people to be successful with opening their craft brewery. So grab a beer, think of your favorite hero story, and we'll move into the brewer's journey. So as you see on the screen in front of you, this is the brewer's journey. It always starts with you. It starts with typically folks with homebrew experience or some professional brewing experience, or folks who have no brewing experience but are just craft beer enthusiasts, and just want to start a brewery because they love the culture, they love beer, and they love community. We've helped people from all backgrounds. It's amazing, but the story, the brewer's journey, always starts with you. And the first tile that you see in the upper left of the brewer's journey is your why. Always start with your why. It's specific to you. It's either it can be your cause, that you care about, your community. Folks are starting breweries in small towns because there needs to be an economic engine or a place to socialize, or it's just your beer, your tasty brew recipes, homebrew recipes that you just want to share with the world. Start with your why. Write down your why and be specific. Write it down, post it on a wall, share it with your friends and family. Tell people why you're starting a craft brewery. Returning back to your why will help along the way as you work long hours and push through obstacles along your way. Reflecting on your why is a good way to keep motivated. As you move forward, after you've defined your why, and you move forward in your journey, meet your mentor. We have system designers at Stout Tanks and Kettles that are available for free consultation. We're happy to share our experience as you move through the brewer's journey. It's important to have somebody on your side that has done this before, that has seen all the iterations of starting a craft brewery, that that can help impart that knowledge and share along the way. Especially when you hit those barriers that seem insurmountable that you can get past. That's where you cross that threshold. So the same thing here. The brewer's world is split into the known world and the unknown world. As you cross that threshold on the brewer's journey, you're going to have some early successes and failures. You're going to experience uh, as you plan your business in your brewery. You're going to have early successes, and you're also going to experience some failures, and that's okay. That's part of the process. As you can see on the graphic, there's also an abyss somewhere. It's somewhere in the unknown world. That abyss, just like the hero's journey, floats around. It's out there somewhere. It can seem insurmountable, but it often is. If a brewer is determined, you can push past the abyss, slay your dragons, and open your craft brewery. An example of an abyss that we've seen in the past is, somebody had a brewer lined up. They were perfect for their culture and their fit, or so they thought, and they get hired away by somebody else, and they're no longer that person's brewer. So that seems insurmountable, but they go out and they find another brewer, and that brewer is a better fit for their culture, and helps them open their brewery. So that abyss is out there. It's somewhere. Having a guide along the way and having the right folks on your team can help as you move through the brewer's journey. So one of the things is the tiles there that you can see is the cast of characters, the funding, the building, and the brewer. So here's the start of as you move through those early successes and failures. It's time to assemble your cast of characters. The funding, the landlord, and the brewer. Obviously, every brewery needs a brewer. If you're not the one producing the beer that will be sold at your brewery, you need to hire a brewer. It seems obvious, but it's always good to have that person on your team. If it's not you, we've helped folks that are all three of these things, but often people need to find somebody to supplement their skills. And having a brewer with a wide range of brewing experience is always helpful. Somebody who can brew a wide variety of beer styles and has the technical and artistic ability to produce the product that your brewery will sell. The landlord. The landlord is somebody that you want in your cast of characters as well. There are, if you don't own your own building, there are landlords out there that would be happy to have a brewery in their building, and that's key. Landlords are business people as well. They want their tenant to be successful, and you want a landlord that is going to help you be successful. If you don't have that landlord on your team and there's some friction, or if they just don't want a brewery in their building, it's going to be a long road. So having that landlord on your team or owning the building is an excellent person to have in your cast of characters. And last but not least, the funding. So you need the money man. You need somebody that either has the cash, or if you don't have the cash, you need to find somebody that has the money for starting your brewery, or somebody who's bankable who can get the money. Somebody with the credit worthiness or the connections to go to your financial institution and acquire the capital to start your brewery. Once you have your cast of characters put together, you're ready to move along that path to brewery ownership. As you can see in the bottom part of that uh, image on the screen, you'll see trials and tribulations. This is really about business planning. This is kind of the nuts and bolts of understanding where you're going and what you want to accomplish as a brewery owner. The first piece in the puzzle is finding your addressable market and deciding who you want to focus on in your addressable market. So understanding the number of folks in your, whether it's your neighborhood, your small town, your city, your region, your state, or the entire country, understanding who you want to target as a customer for your craft brewery is an important piece, and really the basis as you move through each one of these pieces of business planning. You can see the arrow over those first few hash marks on the graphic. That is really about business planning, and they all go hand in hand. The next piece is production planning. Production planning is critical to meet the demand in your addressable market. So understanding how many barrels per year you need to produce to meet the demand in your addressable market is the key takeaway from production planning. Production planning is dependent on menu sizing. When you get to menu sizing, you want to look at the offerings that you're going to have at your brewery, whether that's all ales, all lagers, quick sours, barrel aged sours, just barrel aged beer, whatever it may be at your in your menu offering. Understanding what you will be offering is critical not only to production planning but brewhouse sizing as well, and cellar sizing as well. So they all go hand in hand and they stack on each other. Menu sizing is also critical because an all lager brewery is going to be a different configuration than a mixed fermentation brewery, than a brewery with just standard beer offerings with mostly ales. So we get once we get into brewhouse sizing, we've got our production plan, we've got our menu, our general menu figured out. Then we move into brewhouse sizing, and this one is really about lifestyle. So taking a look at the brewhouse and sizing your brewhouse, your production plan will drive your brewhouse size and your cellar size, along with menu sizing. But your brewhouse size, we see a lot of folks wanting to double or triple batch to have a smaller brew house, but double batch into larger fermenters. And really, it's about lifestyle as that brewery owner. If it's your first business that you're starting, consider all of the tasks that go along with owning a business. There's paperwork for compliance. There's tax paperwork. There's social media. There's cellar work. There's festivals. There's marketing. There's dealing with staff and working with your staff on top of brewing. So sizing your brew house is really about the lifestyle you want to lead, whether you want to brew fewer times per week to meet your production plan, or if you do want to double batch everything and be brewing on a very almost constant basis to meet that production plan. That leads us into cellar sizing. Some folks like to size their cellar specifically for one or two styles that they're going to have on offer, and double batch their flagship to always keep it on tap But your cellar sizing is going to depend on your brew house size, which is going to depend on menu sizing, which is all rolls up into your production plan. So once you've defined your addressable market and understand how many barrels per year of beer you need to produce to meet demand in your addressable market, you figured out your production plan for how you're going to produce those barrels per year, along with your menu, the size of your brew house, and your cellar size. The final piece in the basic business plan overview is sales and distribution plan. So having a way to get that beer to your customer, to your consumer, is critically important. So understanding how you're going to access your consumer, whether it's through distribution or if you're going to sell everything across your own bar, which currently to-go orders are the best model. But a lot of people over the last few years, we've seen the trend toward smaller and smaller tasting rooms where people are producing just enough for their neighborhood, for example, and selling almost all, if not all, of their production over their own bar for the highest profit margin. So planning your sales and distribution plan, once you have all of those pieces of the puzzle together, you have the basis of a solid business plan, and that moves you into the finance piece. So that's when you can take your brew system quote, your basic business plan, and take that to your bank, your credit union, your SBA lender, or whoever it may be, to work on getting the capital needed to start your craft brewery. Once you have that piece in place, that's really when folks start to secure buildings, whether they buy or lease the building. That's when people actually sign leases, and when that happens, you'll see that tile there that says commit to plan and system and reserve equipment. That's really, we've found over hundreds and hundreds of iterations that the timing of when you buy a building or sign a lease, reserving your equipment at that point is most helpful because you have that piece taken care of, and the time to fabricate a complete system and to do build out typically go hand in hand. Those time frames are very similar, and it's really nice to have equipment shipped as you do your build out, so you don't have all of your equipment sitting on your floor as you're trying to epoxy and seal your floors during your build out. That build out phase obviously happens after you've signed the lease on your building or purchased your building. But that build out phase gives you time to stagger delivery of equipment. A good example of that is having your glycol chiller shipped before fermenters. You can have it installed. Typically, folks will install them on a roof or on a cement pad out back of the brewery, and you can stub that in and be ready for your fermenters as they arrive. So you don't have all of that equipment sitting there trying to work around your equipment as you're doing your build out of your production area and your service area. So that leads us into installation and water brew. That's really the point where we have our system designers and our partners through Brewmation available to do free phone and email consultation for your water brew. And we pride ourselves on our support to help with that process. a lot of folks do things DIY for installation. You'll need a licensed electrician, HVAC professional, and plumber. So having those folks on hand, they're not necessarily the part of your cast of characters, but they're a part of your team as you do your installation and water brew. And this is really where it culminates in the defining moments of uh, brewing your first beer as as a brewery owner. That defining moment is it's always nice to see our brewers brewing their first beers and getting those out to the market, doing their grand opening, and seeing their packed tasting rooms. That's really the defining moment for a lot of folks. And I did want to go back to this slide real quick, uh, just to reiterate, as a part of the hero's journey and a part of the brewer's journey, that's the reward of basking and enjoying, seeing your customers enjoy your product. And one of the critical pieces of all of that, having gone through the brewer's journey, is to give back to your community and the brew community. So help each other out, constantly learn as much as you possibly can. Don't stop learning. Help each other brew the highest quality beer that you possibly can brew. That's critical to the industry right now, as it has been a foundation of the industry in the past. But that's what we're doing. We're hoping to give back to the community and the brew community to support people, to help spread good information. And I encourage folks to do the same as you move through the brewer's journey, starting your craft brewery. So that I would like to offer one-to-one meetings with anyone. Jenna will post a link to my schedule there. So you have the opportunity to sign up. I'm happy to answer questions. Our system designers can be reached at support@stouttanks.com to discuss the portion of the brewer's journey that you're on, and help you out wherever you're at. So that I'd like to open it up to questions uh, from people. Um, I see quite a few people answering that poll about where you're at in the brewer's journey. That's great. Thank you all for doing that. It's excellent. I see a lot of people still working on gathering a cast of characters, which is key. I see the question there. What is a water brew? Thanks for answering that question, Tom. Yeah, a water brew is brewing for the first time without grains or hops to go through and actually familiarizing yourself with your system. Each system um, is unique. So understanding your system is important to brewing the highest quality beer that you can. It's a good idea to do that without water first, or without ingredients first. So you're not wasting grains and hops. Perfect. Potential pitfalls to building your own business plan. That's a great question. Thanks for that. Uh, the There are services out there that will write a business plan for you. And there are an unbelievable amount of resources out there on the Brewers Association website for business planning, statistics for the industry for business planning. There's a lot of support out there. There are a ton of folks that are willing to answer questions about their own businesses. Quite candidly, I've approach people and had friends approach people, ask questions, and they're willing to share that information up front. I've had people, offer their business plans. Sometimes you might have to go into the next town over to ask somebody for their business plan. Not necessarily, somebody right in your own town, but often you'd be surprised. People are willing to help each other out in the industry and really give back. So some of the pitfalls, really, like I said, there are services that will write a business plan for you, but there's more pitfalls in that than not writing one yourself. And the biggest issue with having a service write a plan for you is that you might not fully understand the plan when it comes back to you. Going through the exercise of each one of these points and understanding it fully and why it's important to you and your business is really the value of writing your own business plan. And like I said, there are an amazing amount of resources out there to help people out. So take advantage of those business planning resources out there. Let's see here. Yeah, this is a good question. So, how long does it usually take to get licensed after build out is done? I've heard 1 or 2 years, which is a long time to pay for a lease without income. So that is it's a good question, and it depends on local licensing, whether it's through your city, your state, municipality, whatever it may be, or national licensing, and all of those vary. It typically takes the TTB here in the U.S. Have a website, and they give you the time frame for how long it will take, so you can actually see average processing times for licensing, which is really handy to check. But what we're seeing is most folks, it comes down to your city or your state or where you're planning your brewery, and that is honestly all over the board. It's not something that we can really predict because it might be a small town. I had a customer in Alaska, for example. There was one person in the state that could inspect and certify them, so they had to wait for that person to be available. And I think it took probably about 90 days for them to come up and do the check, which was actually on par with their TTB federal license. So it really does depend on your relationship with your local authorities, and asking them that question is a great way to go, or other breweries in your area. So statewide, you might ask another brewery in the state how long it took, and you can kind of take that with a grain of salt too, because the circumstances for them might be different than they are for you, but it will give you a general idea of what it might have taken time-wise. But to your point too, it is a good idea to get that information if you can, or at least plan that information. It's not a bad idea to have 6 to 9 months worth of runway in your business plan for cash to pay a lease, or negotiate some of that time frame in free rent from your landlord. Some folks are willing to do that as a landlord. to give you some, a couple of months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may be, to do your build out without paying that lease up front. So all of that's negotiable, and it's something that is worth looking into. Thank you. Let's see here. See if I can find some of these other questions. Thanks for these questions. Yeah. So, what is a good resource to help define your market? That's a good question. Looking at those, the Brewers Association, a lot of times they'll do voluntary surveys of sales data. So you can jump in and take a look at what other breweries in your state have sold as far as barrels per year, and that can give you an idea. It doesn't necessarily tell you if all of that was sold in state or whatever it may be. But there are resources out there for planning, barrels per seat per year. Busy brew pub versus small tasting room. Having food actually has a pretty big impact on sales data. And looking at a business that is very similar to yours can help determine the velocity of sales. But looking at your greater market, looking at demographics, how many people over the age of 21 in the U.S., looking at how many people over the age of 21 live within X number of miles of your brewery, how many cars are passing by your location per day. That's a good indicator of how many people might stop by, and see what your addressable market might be. Thanks, Tom. So, yeah, I do have a question here about specific sizing based on, some tourist activity in your area. That would be a great one. I would be happy to do a one-on-one call and just chat about some options for that brew house size, because a lot of that is going to depend on the details of your production plan, your menu sizing, all of those other points that we talked about earlier. A lot of those will go into that, and so a one-to-one conversation would be super helpful. I'd be happy to have that conversation with you. Excellent. Nice. Thank you guys for and gals for the comments. Yeah, I see somebody's in the process of planning their opening and delaying until September. Um, yeah, there are quite a few openings that states are locked down. There's a few states that haven't done a shelter in place currently. This conversation, for future viewers, might not be super relevant, but a lot of folks are driving forward, full steam ahead, because the plan was put in place. The expectation is that things are going to open up again. We don't know exactly when, but they will open up eventually, and businesses will be able to go back to normal service. How important is it to have a lawyer involved when starting the process? That is definitely a good question for your lawyer. See if I'm not a lawyer myself, and you know, can't give legal advice, but a lawyer can. And starting any business, there are legal documents that need to be drafted. So that is a conversation that I would have with a lawyer. Nice. I see folks commenting on where you're starting your breweries. That's excellent. Ooh, wastewater. Yeah. So um, we have a question specific to wastewater, and there are all kinds of or can be all kinds of regulatory bodies that are involved in wastewater, depending on your local code. So there's a great resource. I'll see if I can send it out in the notes. I think it's brewery wastewater 101.com or brewerywastewater.com. Um, uh, Not associated with that gentleman and his business, but it's a great resource for understanding side streaming and understanding the quantity of water, the volume of water that you're going to have to deal with as you brew regularly. And it definitely depends on your brewing schedule, your system size, um, and whether your packaging or type of packaging, um, uh, as far as wastewater goes, and having a plan to deal with all of those streams of wastewater and the types of wastewater you want to deal with. I know it's critically important down in California because water is a very expensive commodity. And in some places, wastewater can be dealt with pretty, fairly easily. So most of the time, a local engineer is going to be able to answer those specific questions and determining your system size and your brewing frequency is going to be those are going to be two key pieces of information for that conversation. Nice. I see folks answering some of those questions in there. Yeah. Yeah, Joshua, good question. With the what is the average timeline for the hero to go from planning to brewing and making money? It's a good question, and it is highly dependent on organization and your the planning portion. Some folks have anywhere from a couple of months to write a business plan to several years to write a business plan. So the planning portion, uh, it's really hard to nail down a timeline from I want to start a craft brewery to I'm making money. But there are a few points in there that we have visibility into as far as the brewer's journey goes. One of those pieces is planning the timeline from budgetary to brewing or at least delivery, is typically around 1 year. And the reason for that is the biggest piece in there that we find is folks finding and signing a lease on a building. Um, I've had some folks take a couple of years for that to work out for them. But if you find a location, sign a lease, lock it down, Typically, we see build out taking anywhere from 6 to 9 months, sometimes a year. But that also depends on whether you're doing a lot of the work yourself or whether you're hiring, a team to come in and do design work and do all of the, swinging hammers and all of that. So it is really dependent on each individual's desires and really what they want for their business and what they want it to look like. One of the things that I did want to mention in that planning to build out to making money is one of the pitfalls, which is uh, we've seen a couple of folks kind of overspend on window dressing for the tasting room portion of the brewery. And it's a brewery, it's beer, you're not trying to attract the clientele necessarily that is looking for the fanciest, nicest place. People are generally looking for a comfortable place to sit and have a beer with friends and family and socialize. So building a place that facilitates social interaction and really focuses on good quality beer is a pretty rock solid model. But we've seen folks put more money than is really necessary into window dressing and kind of peter out because it's too expensive for hand cut exotic wood and granite countertops and bar tops and things like that that just aren't necessarily the appeal of craft breweries these days. Thank you. All right, so I did want to give everyone an opportunity to take that infographic for the brewer's journey. You can use that along your path. It helps in conversations to know where folks are at and what you're working on to help you further. Feel free to download that, print it off, pin it on your wall. Look at it from time to time and use it as a guide as you move through the process. And don't forget to reach out. We're always happy to help. Thank you, everyone.